This is our tiny house on wheels. It was built in early 2016, and we've been living in it now for over 6 years. We have really enjoyed the tiny house lifestyle. It took some adjustments in the beginning, but overall we would say that the benefits definitely have outweighed the costs for us. But there are some very specific challenges that come with living in such a small space and trying to keep all of your utilities functioning when it is cold. So in this tour, we're going to talk about a few of those interesting things that we have experienced living in 192 square feet in the winter. Hi, I'm Laura, and this is my 8x24 tiny house on wheels. We just had a blizzard yesterday where we got about 1.5 feet of snow, so I wanted to give you the winter tour of the tiny house because things are a little bit different living in a small space when it's cold out.
So don't let the weight of the world slow you down. And if you search for the meaning of life, it won't be found. So take your insecurities and leave them all behind. Let's learn to make the most of our time. Of our time.
Our front door is actually this big sliding glass door, which is great because it lets in a lot of light, especially in the summer. You can see we're in a pretty forested area, which we love. You can see trees in every direction, but in the winter, this is a place where we tend to lose a lot of heat. So we have double curtains, and we ended up creating this kind of accordion folded Reflectex that is very helpful for keeping some of the heat in at night, especially because we use a wood stove for a portion of our heating in the winter. And when we go to sleep, we are not going to get up in the middle of the night to put wood in the wood stove. So we just kind of let the heat die down, and the more insulation that we can have on our windows, the better the tiny house retains heat. Now, the sliding glass door has been great, but we recently redid our floors. We had a leak underneath this floor and we had to rip out the subfloor. So we got our new flooring put in, which is one of our favorite upgrades for the tiny house. In this corner here behind our curtains is kind of a hidden closet area. There's no closet space in a tiny house. You have to get really creative with where you put things, especially in the winter because you have bulkier clothing, and this is my raincoat, Patrick's backpack. We put our bigger containers of laundry detergent and things like that we don't want in the way tucked behind the curtains, and you don't even know that they're there when we pull back the curtains. So you're always looking for places that you can put things and figure out kind of creative ways to create storage, especially using your vertical space. That's kind of become a theme since we've lived in the tiny house. We've figured out that you have to maximize your vertical space. When we were designing the tiny house, we had an option to put cabinets up in our kitchen area, and we decided that we didn't want cabinets. We wanted an open concept kitchen, and I'm glad that we did that. We don't have a lot of storage space for kitchen gadgets and plates and dishes and things like that. So what you see is pretty much everything that we have in terms of pots and pans. Our oven and stove is a typical RV setup. It's a 3-burner propane stove, and it also has a propane oven, which is a really nice option. I like having an oven. I like to roast vegetables, make potatoes and things like that. So having an oven was really important to me. We have created this storage system mostly from IKEA. We got a lot of these hanging storage options from IKEA. We use a lot of hooks, again, to make use of that vertical space. And I have my tea shelves and some of the higher shelves for things that we don't use quite as often, but using hooks and hanging things on the wall has become super important. One of the things that I recently added were these produce nets because this wall was a space that we weren't really utilizing. So now I can put our apples and oranges and onions and things like that in these hammocks, and it frees up a lot more counter space because Counter space is a premium in the tiny house, especially after we put the wood stove in. It took a lot of our flat surfaces away. Our countertop is butcher block, and this is something that people have asked me about quite a few times. The butcher block has been kind of a struggle. We've refinished it 3 times in the 6 years that we've lived in the tiny house, because this surface right here is where we do all of our cooking and washing dishes. So this is a super high wear area, and everything was soaking into the wood. If there were scratches, it was leaving stains. So we ended up sanding it and finally refinished it with a really good polyurethane, and now it's holding up well. So I think the butcher block is here to stay, but just make sure you get a good polyurethane, because otherwise it's extremely hard to keep it looking clean and new. One of the things that I really wanted in the design of our tiny house was a large sink, because sometimes you'll see tiny houses that have these little tiny sinks that you can't fit pots and pans in. So having a full-size sink and a tall faucet was very important just for the practicality of being able to wash dishes, especially because we do cook at home a lot. So big sink was super important to me. And this is our Berkey water filter, another thing that's very critical in the tiny house. So we live in what's essentially a campground, and if you've ever gone camping, you know most campgrounds are notorious for having water that has a weird taste or has all sorts of things that you don't want in your water. So all of our cooking and drinking water gets filtered through the Berkey. It's a gravity feed system. We use this to fill up the top chamber up there, and then over a period of time it filters down into the bottom chamber, and then we can get water out of there. As we come around the kitchen, this is one of the things that we added about 2 years ago, and it has taken up a little bit of our counter space, but this is one of my absolute favorite things in the tiny house. It's our GRIZZLY wood stove. And this has transformed the experience of living in a tiny house in the winter. Our first 3 winters in the tiny house were a little bit rough. I have another video talking about all of the things that broke and froze and needed to be replaced. But when we got the wood stove, it was this very strong change, because we were able to actually make the house warm and cozy instead of just running the electric heaters all the time so that we weren't cold. This really gives a warm, cozy feeling to the tiny house. And the extra bonus of the wood stove that we got is that there's an oven attachment on the top. So this piece just sits up here, and I'm able to put roasted potatoes or anything that I want to have cooking while we are heating the house with the wood stove, which I think is great, because if you're creating heat, you might as well throw something in the oven and have it cooking as well. Right next to the wood stove, we have our Dyson air purifier, and we like to have this because we can look up on our phones the air quality inside. We can look up the temperature and the humidity, which is a big deal in a tiny house. We have to keep track of our indoor humidity. In such a small space, when you're cooking and showering and even just breathing, a lot of moisture gets released into the air. And most places in the winter need to add humidity to the air. In a tiny house, it's the opposite. We are constantly trying to take humidity out. The wood stove has helped quite a bit in creating a very dry heat. So we've been doing a lot better this year with managing our humidity and our condensation, but we still need to keep track with the Dyson to see where we're at and if we need to run our dehumidifier, which is something we do pretty regularly in the winter. But this will also do a little bit of heating and cooling, and it's neat because we can control it with an app, so it's easy for us to check what the temperature is in the tiny house for Redford. If we're not home, we can just look on our phone and make sure that the temperature is good, that he's comfortable, because everyone knows Redford doesn't like being cold. The other thing that we have over here is our washer-dryer combo. And I was kind of on the fence about getting this when we were building the tiny house, but Patrick really wanted to have a washer dryer, so we ended up getting this one. This is a pretty typical unit that you would see people putting in RVs or tiny houses. it does both the wash cycle and the dry cycle in the one unit. And it's great for convenience, but the actual capacity of it is pretty small. So typically we will do a load of laundry almost every day between our work clothes, going to the gym, you know, towels and things like that. We pretty much do a load of laundry every day because it only takes a couple things. But the convenience of being able to wash our clothes and not have to go to a laundromat has definitely been worth it. The only thing that we do still have to go to the laundromat for are bigger blankets, and some of the larger bedding items will not fit into here, but everyday clothes, it's really good for that. This is our refrigerator. This was one of the things that we ended up upgrading in the tiny house, not because we planned to, but because our old fridge broke. And when we were going through the process of figuring out what to replace it with, we decided to special order this fridge that has a taller profile and a narrower footprint, so it fit in the space perfectly. It also has the refrigerator on top and the freezer on bottom, which I've actually really liked because you tend to go into the fridge more, so it's just more convenient when you're getting things out of the fridge, having that on the top. Over here we put in some cabinets to hold some of our food. This is kind of like our pantry area. We put some stuff on top of the fridge, we put some things on top of those cabinets, and then we put in shelves to hold some of our other kind of dry goods. Storage is definitely a challenge in the tiny house. You have to get creative with where you put things. I think I might get some more of the produce hammocks because we do like to have a lot of produce in the house. One of the challenges, especially more recently during the pandemic, of not wanting to go to the grocery store quite as often, is trying to find places to keep a little bit more food on hand. And in the winter too, you don't want to have to run out to the store as frequently, so we've had to kind of figure out some creative ways to fit things into the tiny house that we want to have on hand. The other thing that we have over here is our electric heater. Since we both work, it's not practical for the wood stove to be our only source of heat. So we definitely have to use an electric heater. And I like this one a lot because we're able to turn it on and set it to a temperature. If it goes below 65 in the house, this heater is going to turn on. So it's kind of the perfect option as the wood stove dies down at night when we're sleeping. In the morning, this is going to kick on to make sure that the house doesn't get too cold. So it's a nice mixture of using the wood stove whenever we can, but having the electric heater to turn on just as a kind of a convenience option to keep the house warm. Over here is something that we've made a pretty big change with recently, and that's our couch. We had a love seat from IKEA. It was one of the things that we bought on our original trip when we were furnishing the tiny house. And what we decided was that the couch was taking up a lot of room. It actually didn't fit the space perfectly. There were some gaps on the side where there was unused space, and it was just kind of inefficient. So we decided to take the couch apart and take some of the cushions from our Scamp, our RV, and we created this seating option on the floor. And the real reason that we decided to get rid of our traditional couch and create this floor couch was because I teach yoga and I started working from home more during the pandemic. So I needed a space where I could fit my yoga mat and be able to film videos and do classes through Zoom without having a bunch of stuff in the background. So this couch can be taken apart. I can put all of the cushions up into the loft and onto the other side of the house so that I can create a studio space basically. So if I'm working from home, this all moves to the other side of the house and it becomes my studio, and I can film and work pretty comfortably over here. But that is why we got rid of our couch. In the corner here is one of our important things, and that is the Dyson vacuum. It's a great small vacuum. It hangs right on the wall. It has a bunch of different attachments that we can use for cleaning up the floor quickly. One of the things that I didn't realize before moving into the tiny house is that although the space is small and you can clean it quickly, it gets dirty so fast. Everything gets tracked in, especially if you have a dog, so you're going to want to have a vacuum that you can just pop out, vacuum for a couple seconds, and throw back onto the wall. This is the desk and table area. We originally bought this off of Amazon because we thought that we wanted a table to eat meals at, and it has actually been a nice piece of furniture because we can take these stools out. This is actually the only place to sit that we have in the house, but we tend to actually put the iPad on it or the laptop on it just to hold it up. This can turn around and the table will come up, but we've only eaten one meal ever on that. We tend to just sit on the couch most of the time and hold our plate, and we're fine with that. I ended up putting another desk on top of here and some of my yoga props to lift the laptop up and create a standing desk. Since I teach yoga online and we have a YouTube channel, I spent a lot of time on the computer editing and uploading videos, so I wanted a comfortable space to be able to work on the computer. So that's what this area is. One of the things you're also going to see a lot around the house are these little dry packs, and these are essential in the winter. We have them in every corner, we have them by the door, we have them back here behind the couch because they draw the moisture in, and that is so important because, again, condensation, humidity, and moisture are a constant concern when you live in a small space, whether it's an RV or a tiny house. When the temperature outside is really cold and the temperature inside is warm, you're going to get a lot of condensation. As we come around the other side of the house, we have our ladder to get up into the loft. We definitely wanted to have our bed up in the loft because it saves so much space on the floor plan, and we don't mind climbing up and down a ladder. It's been fine. You get used to it pretty quickly. The other thing was that we wanted the ladder to be able to be taken down pretty easily, and during the day when we're moving around, we just put the ladder on the side, and it opens up a ton of floor space. You know, people are always concerned about floor space and how far they can reach from side to side, but I love the fact that we can move this ladder and put it into place when we need to go up and get something from our storage up there, or when we're getting in and out of bed, we just keep the ladder there. But during the day, when we want more floor space, we can move that over to the side. For the winter clothes, I've added a lot more hooks, again, trying to make use of our vertical space. I put more hooks here for our winter jackets, our layers of fleece and hats and all of that good stuff. One of my other favorite things here is this accordion dryer, because it sits right across from the wood stove. So if we are shoveling snow like we were this morning, when we come back in and we have all of our wet clothes, we can hang stuff up to let it dry pretty quickly. It's just been really helpful. Or if something comes out of the dryer and it's still a little bit damp, we can hang it up here, let it dry, and then fold it back into place. One of the other things that I really like that we had installed are these hooks that are anchored into the frame of the roof, into that steel beam. And this is a little TRX suspension system for doing exercises. When we were in the condo, we had an exercise bike and some different exercise equipment that we use, and I was concerned when we moved into a smaller space that it would be hard to be able to work out and move around as much, but these have been my favorite thing to do a quick workout in the morning before I go to work. Very helpful. And then I just kind of tuck them back there and they're out of the way. One of the things that we just added rather recently are these shelves here for our shoes, just to get them up off of the floor. We used to just put our shoes in front of the door, but they would kind of get in the way, so we put shelves here that keeps them up off the floor. We also use this area on the wheel well for extra storage for cans. We might end up changing that eventually to have something that maybe looks a little bit more organized, but for right now, we just kind of put them onto the wheel well. Every tiny house or bus build that you see is going to have this extra little bump out from where the wheel wells sit on the trailer, and everybody kind of comes up with their own uses for that little bump from the wheel well. So we're using it to hold some of our extra food right now. So behind this curtain we have a little bit more storage. We've got Red's leash, our headlamps, keys, and different things that we need there. And that all kind of sits behind the curtain. And the next important thing is the trunk. This trunk was put here for a little bit of storage and two kind of critical things, especially in the winter. This is our indoor wood, so that we don't have to keep opening the door and going outside to get wood. We keep a whole bag of wood in here, and that'll usually last us the night. And then we've got Redford's food and Redford's jacket, so some of the dog stuff in there. Because when you have a really big bag of dog food, you need somewhere to put that, and that's a tricky thing in the tiny house. So the trunk has worked out very well for holding some of those bigger, bulkier items that we don't want just kind of sitting out on the floor. At the front of the tiny house is a small bathroom. It has just enough room for a small sink, the toilet, and a stall shower. We recently did a little bit of a renovation to the bathroom where we switched out the sink that used to be a pedestal sink for this sink with a cabinet underneath it, and that left just enough room for the door to open and close, barely. So it's tight quarters in the bathroom, but it works. It does all the things that you need a regular bathroom to do, and we are very happy that we are able to make this work so well, even though there's not a lot of room. IKEA has helped a lot with creative storage solutions. I'm so glad that you stuck around to the end for our tiny house tour. I hope that you learned something about living in a tiny house and some of the challenges that we face during the colder weather and the winter season. And if you enjoyed this tour, make sure to subscribe to our channel, and you can learn more about living in a tiny house, all of the challenges, and all of the rewards that come with this rather unusual lifestyle. And you can also find some of our travel videos where we travel with our Scamp and our dog Redford. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, you worried about you and me, the injustice, the next president to be, the news and what you hear, your career. It's time for you to face those fears, and it's all fair to be aware, and I'll be there, so don't be scared. Just take a deep breath of air, and 1, 2, 3 to 10, you begin to focus again, and though time flies, we'll have enough to realize this bigger than the both of us.